In January 2022, Ray was appointed by Governor Phil Scott after a former member of the House of Representatives resigned. She ran for office again after her term ended that year and won. Ray is a part of the House Committee of Human Services.
How do you collaborate with members of the opposite party to find common ground and achieve legislative goals, especially in a House with such little opposition? And how does the fact that the governor is a part of a minority party affect legislation?
So can I answer the second question first?
Yeah.
I think it's really challenging with the governor right now. I don't know if you know, but he has vetoed more legislation than any other governor in the history of the state.
Wow.
So I think today was his 41st veto of his governorship in the time he's been here. And he's been way ahead of any other governor by like 10 vetoes.
Yeah.
So, and he vetoed our child care bill today.
Okay.
So what for me, and this kind of goes back to the first part of the question, is legislation is about relationships with your colleagues, with your constituents, with your stakeholders. And I just feel like we had a really good opportunity for the governor this year because Democrats had supermajority, for him to come with kind of an open mind to collaborate with us and build some of those relationships on some priorities that we share. Childcare is a priority that we share. Democrats and Republicans we had a tripartisan bill pass both chambers, and he vetoed that, even though a lot of Republicans spoke in support of it and voted for it. So it makes it a lot more challenging when you're doing extra work because of the vetoes and because of the roadblocks. So I just wish that there was more of an open, collaborative nature to our working relationship. And then I'll say, like, in the House, I have a lot of Republican colleagues in my committee. We have 2 Republicans that I work really great with.
Yeah.
They were aligned on most policies. And when we disagree, it's really nice to hear why they disagree and their perspective. And I think that's how you build relationships. That's how you move big, pieces of policy forward.
We talked in AP Gov a lot about the incumbency advantage, and when you're reelected, that you have a pretty large advantage. Yeah. And I know you didn't get elected in the first place, so it's hard for you to judge that. But do you feel like you had a lot more traction after you had already started to serve?
I did. I think one thing that's huge for an incumbent is that you have a record that you get to run on.
Yeah.
So for me, even though I was only there for one session, I still had a lot of votes that I took, and there was a lot of policies that I could show that I support. So when I was out campaigning last summer and fall, I was telling constituents, look, I have been voting on stuff that aligns with your values. And when I heard people talk about childcare or, taxes or affordable housing, I could show that, or equity, I could show that last year we worked on policy that I helped move along to become law, and that I would continue that work. So I think that makes a huge difference, and there is a huge incumbent advantage. I will also say that I think it's really important for more regular Vermonters to have access to this decision-making table, right?
Yeah.
I know money can be a barrier for some candidates, especially when you consider the fact that the candidate who spends the most money is often the candidate who wins. How did you feel like this fact affected your campaign?
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think money in politics is a huge problem in why our country is having a lot of issues with our politics. I think we do it better in Vermont. I think we're a little bit insulated from that. We don't have huge races that cost, a ton of money. I don't know if that's because our population is less, but for me, I didn't personally experience that. I didn't need to raise a ton of money. We did a lot, I'm fairly well known in the community, and we did a lot of just like community forums, just getting together with people and door knocking with my district mates. So that's how we got out into the community to get to know people, and a lot of work with like stakeholders and getting endorsements. So I kind of use those relationships rather than try to raise a lot of funds for the campaign.
How has being part of the legislative process differed from your expectations?
It's very slow.
Okay.
So, I'm very practical. So I knew that I wouldn't come in, to the legislature and be able to like just change everything in, short order, but it's a very intentionally slow process. So that's a good and bad thing. I think, for every bill, we need to hear from every side. Each bill gets assigned to a committee. And if it gets taken up to be deliberated on, we have to take testimony from every side. So like, for example, for the child care bill, we took testimony from over 50 witnesses.
Wow.
And we're doing that in just a couple of weeks because we only have 5.5 months for the whole session. So, and that's a good process because people bring their perspective that we may not know. There's 11 of us in the room and we don't know everything about everything. So we want to bring in people. And just the last minute changes are not something I had expected. You craft a bill, you pass it, and then it goes to the other chamber, and then they totally disagree with you. Yeah. So then they send it back different. So that back and forth. And again, it just feels like there's not enough time because we're on this part-time schedule.
Do you get a lot of outreach from the community, and how do you respond to that?
So we hold, me and the other Essex and Westford representatives, we hold community conversations once a month. And we advertise that on Front Porch Forum and on Facebook and other social media. So once a month, we're either on Zoom or in person, and we, just kind of have a 2-hour session where people can come and talk to us, ask us questions, tell us what their priorities are. So those this year were pretty well attended. We held one in Essex Town, Essex Junction, Westford, and on Zoom. So that's a really great way to meet and hear from the constituents. We get a ton of email from constituents. So, there's some constituents that are really engaged and active, and they'll work with different activist groups to reach out on very particular specific legislation, or just generally when people have questions about, we heard a lot about the Affordable Heat Act. People had questions because there was so much misinformation out in the public. I respond to my emails. I reach out to when there's significant stuff happening at the high school. I try to write to students and congratulate them, or, I try to be accessible and available as much as possible.
What has been most challenging for you?
I think just lack of time. Again, a lot of legislators in my shoes have other jobs or have other commitments. So not having such a short period of time to work on really significant legislation has been hard. It's hard to kind of say there's so many things that, when you first get there's so many things you want to do, and there's so many pieces of legislation or different areas that you want to think about or introduce. And then you realize that you really have such limited time, so you have to prioritize because we don't have time. There's no way we would be able to, take everything up and hear every perspective on every issue.
Reflection. Being an elected official, especially in a state legislative body, seems like a very interesting job because you can really cater to the needs of your people. From what Ray said, it also seems like the legislative process is even slower than I could have imagined, and fulfilling an agenda takes more work than many people realize. Local politicians and elected officials are very important because they care about you and have more time for you than higher-up federal officials. Overall, this interview has made the idea of becoming an elected official much more interesting to me, and I'm excited to learn more about the topic. Connections to AP government and politics. Bipartisanship and bipartisan legislation. Recently, the governor has opposed many of the policies that have been passed by the legislature, even laws which had bipartisan support in the House. Ray mentioned this specifically with I think it was a child care bill that she had been working on, and how Governor Phil Scott has actually broken the record for the governor who has had the most vetoes. So yeah. The incumbency advantage. Incumbents have had an easier time getting reelected when compared to candidates who have not served. Ray experienced this as she did not run for a first term and was appointed. So Ray said that after her first term, when she had to get reelected, she found it easier to talk to people and to say, "Oh, look, I voted on this. This is." She had some sort of traction. Money in politics and elections. Vermont, on a local level, seems somewhat insulated from this problem. We don't have huge election races that consume millions of dollars. Ray said that it was pretty comfortable. She didn't have to raise a whole bunch of money for her election in order to win, obviously, which is a good thing. That's not a problem in Vermont as much. And Ray said, I think that this could have something to do with the population of Vermont, but yeah, it's good that this isn't necessarily as much of a problem here.